Rick, tell us a little bit more about the therapy pool.
I'll defer to
Okay, so the therapy pool will hold 25 to 30 people. It would also be a good place for little people to go. Typically used dual purpose, as it states therapy. So whether we have aqua classes in there, water arthritis type things that aren't in deep water, but it's also a really good place for swim lessons and yes, little people swim lessons. Usually up to the age of about 6 is ideal for that age pool. So it's a little bit warmer and it's not any deeper than, I think the deepest it gets is about 4 feet. About 4 feet.
I think it's another example similar to the lazy river of multifunction water. Water that can be used by multiple age groups, multi-generation. We can get kids in some of this water, we can get older folks in some of this water. It can be used for exercise, it can be used for recreation. Those are the type of things that we were really truly looking to do when we put the aquatics portion together, is try to find what's the most utility we can get out of these bodies of water. So I think that's another good example similar to the lazy river of multi-use.
you want to talk about the outdoor water solutions? Okay.
Do you want to go through your piece first, then we can come back to this? All the other things.
Oh, all the questions.
Yeah. Let's pause you for a second.
Perfect.
Deep into the outdoor.
So we made some presentations Monday evening, and we received some feedback. I think I may have not clarified. Well, as we look at the solutions that we have before us, some of the things in here we can still play with. Some of them we can still, once again, time, money. Some of those other things are not as important. We can have some larger conversations about some things we might be able to do outside. Really, what we needed to know, or the thing that really led me to think that a work session was going to be critical, is the difference between a 25-meter pool and 50-meter pool, and 6 full lanes and 8 full lanes. That's, we start talking about moving the building. When we start talking about moving the building, we start talking about excavating. We start talking about the ripple effects that those things happen. Well, this looks very simple, and some people may look at it and think that it makes perfect sense to them, and you know that they can see things through the paper. What you don't see in there is that every time you move something or you add something to there, you might have additional equipment. You might have, there's other things, and that's part of why it's great that we've got some of the professionals here that can help us fully understand. So if we say, hey, I'd like to add this, or I want to, and not just add this, but add more water. The more water you have, you might have a larger or different pump or filtration unit. Those are all things that have implications that are deeper and more meaningful and a little bit under the surface than just, hey, instead of a triangle, let's make a square. Instead of a circle, let's make a half circle. So some of the questions that we got that I wanted to report back out to council. Do I have control of it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, but I need
This is your presentation, so you're just keep going.
Oh, gotcha. So we presented. So one of the questions we got, there was a topic discussion about swim and diving. There was kind of a conversation about deck space and what do our neighbors have. So felt it was important to report out and share with everyone what everybody else has in our area. So fairway, I'm not necessarily going to go through all of it, but I did put as much information as I thought might be relevant in these to just kind of give a comparison of what we're talking about. This is an 8 by 25 meter pool. Fairway would be the smallest of the cities that we would compare with that actually have a pool. There's Westwood Hills, Mission Hills.
Real quick, when you go through this, will you tell us if there's competitive swimming at each location?
There will be competitive swimming. I may not know the answer to that, but I think there's competitive swimming in all of them. I think they're all part of Johnson County Swim and Dive, except for Mission that I think I consider. So Fairway is part of Swim and Dive, competitive and pre-competitive. Roland Park is also, they've got one outdoor pool facility. They've got 9, I don't know where they got 9 lanes, but I counted 9 lanes in here by 25, and 3 lanes, even though it says land, 3 by 50. This is a movable bulkhead, so they could do 3 lanes at 50, but I'm guessing they don't run races that way because you don't run three, you take them all night if they did it that way. Mission, this is Mission's new pool. They have an outdoor pool facility. They've got an indoor pool facility. They've got an 8-lane by 25. This is our existing pool facility. I think
There's
we're all.
one question on the way, we're going to go back.
Say that if you.
You want questions?
Sure, if you've got questions.
Yeah,
about
I was
it,
just
I'll
curious.
Try to answer them.
See, this is, in my mind, I mean, I've been to Mission Pool. This is kind of what I envisioned ours was going to look like. How much was their pool and when was it built?
Their pool is $11.9 million.
That's the general budget.
That's the general fund. That's what
Oh, that's so much. Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to know what it cost to build that pool.
They built that pool, they passed that when I first started, so it opened in 13 or 14.
Do we know what they spent to build it?
I don't.
I can find out.
Yeah, we can get that for you. I don't know.
Can you go back to the fairway? One of the things that's actually a bigger pool than our 25-meter pool for a number of reasons. And the key thing to point out is it has a separate diving well. In the design that we were presented with, the diving well takes up probably almost half of the pool. So having a separate diving well actually is a significantly enhanced feature compared to what we're proposing here. So when you're looking at 25-meter pools, you have that plus you have some other components.
Thank you. Roland Park, Mission, our existing pool facility, Prairie Village pool facility, they've got a 50-meter pool. Lee Woods pool facility, they've got one outdoor pool facility for their city, 8-lane by 50, and then 6-lane by 25, so they kind of have a little bit of both in here. Lenexa has similar, they've got a 8-lane by 50, and then I called it 425. I don't know if they run meets on both sides, but they've got 8 lanes running that direction, and they've got 8 lanes running the other, so they have a 50-meter separate dive well, to David's point, and a zero depth entry. Shawnee's pool, they've got the 8 by 50 and the 6 by 25 in their pool facility. Olathe has 4 outdoor pools as well as their new community center, which has indoor pool facilities. This particular one, I believe this is the one that the competitive ones are run at. Getting some head nods from the crowd. So this is a 50-meter by 8-lane and then a 6-lane by 25-meter. If you, I guess it's 12, but 6 on each side of it in their larger pool complex. This is where they run their pre-competitive meets. This is a 6 by 25. Other features of the pool are a separate dive well and a zero depth entry. And then this is Overland Park. This is Young's Pool down on Antioch. They have 5 outdoor pools as well as an indoor pool facility. This particular pool facility is an 8 by 25. They've got a zero depth with 5 by 25 along with some slide features at Young's. So these are all the pool. I think Mission's the only one that's in the MOCAN League. I'm pretty familiar with all these pools. For anybody that knows what I did before I did this for 7 years, I oversaw everything that went on in this pool. I've hosted all city meets at this pool. I've hosted swim meets, dive meets, synchronized swimming meets at this pool. Did it for 7 years. So I know a little bit about swimming pools. If we put all this information into graph, you'll kind of, or into a chart, you'll kind of see that we're in this. If you take it by population, if you took it by square miles, if you took it by general fund, we're kind of in that. Are we a little city? Are we a big city? Are we a middle city? Depending on how we judge what these cities are, if we judge them by a 50-meter 8-lane pool, or if you judge them by a 25 8-lane, there is no clear point of reference of who we should be or who we shouldn't be or where we would fit in terms of the size of our city or population anywhere else. So this is just, I thought this was interesting because we're right there on the cusp of where does it make sense to have a 50-meter pool, if that's actually a metric that you want to use for your decision making.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
I'm not that involved with competitive swimming.
Yeah.
So you've seen it. Other people like Anna and some other people have seen it. What are the advantages and disadvantages distance and having a 50 meter, of course, you don't turn as many times because it's longer distance. But are the swim teams concerned about going down 25, turning and coming back at 25? They'd rather go the whole length of 50. But if I'm hearing you right, there's competition in 25. The same people do a competition at 25 as the 50?
The same. The only difference between the 50 and the 25 is you're turning.
Right.
Because you're hitting 25 and coming back. I would argue that actually your times are a little bit better than 25.
Really?
But I'm sure somebody would argue with me on that.
So if we do move the building to the east and allow 8 lanes, that would be comparable
That would
to-
be, you would have 8 lanes. So to answer your question, in my experience is that seldom in recreational swimming is the 50 meter about the swimmers, it's about the parents.
Okay.
That's my experience, my opinion. It's about sight lines, deck space, how many kids are on the deck. That's in my experience, I speak for myself.
Okay, for competitive swimming, I can see a compromise. However, I can't see a compromise with the number of people that will swim in a 25-meter pool if we keep the diving board area strictly for diving.
Well, you don't have to have the diving board open all the time. During a meet, you wouldn't have the dive meets are different than the swim meets. So during dive,
I'm not
that's a
talking
whole
about diving,
different day.
I'm just talking about opening the boards up for people to play on during the day.
Okay.
Okay, so if we do that, and I went out and measured the pool myself with some help from the audience back here, and I was amazed at how small an area we'd be having just for hanging out and playing and throwing balls back and forth, etc. And I'm kind of disappointed in that kind of area for just hanging out. So if the pool is used for diving at the same play diving, not
Sure,
competitive,
understood.
at the same time it's allowed for just hanging out in the pool,
You're shutting a portion of the pool.
I'm a little disappointed in the size of the pool.
Yeah, sure. Understood. Yeah, you would shut down. That's part of the calculation for bather loads. I mean, they say 300 square foot is what each one of those diving boards takes out of your calculation for usable pool space. So you are correct.
We had a discussion, you and I, at lunch the other day, and you said the retaining wall, whatever that be on the south side,
If we needed a retaining wall.
could be with TIF money. Is that what I heard you say?
I said that there were infrastructure things inside that would be allowable for TIF. There are pool things that are not allowable for
Right.
TIF. But that would be a funding conversation,
Okay,
if
but-
that's what we want to account for.
Would the TIF money be available for the retaining wall?
Possibly.
That's why I thought I heard you say it once.
Possibly.
Would it
Okay.
be available for what?
A retaining wall. If we needed to put a retaining wall there to get larger pool.
And I see a number of retaining walls terracing down.
Sure.
Is there a way we can just build one huge
The
retaining?
point of that is actually a concession for visibility, to actually enhance. One of the proposals that you'll see in here actually moves the pool closer to that wall and then creates terracing for spectators. That's actually, well, so you, because once again, the concerns that we've heard is partially people want to be able to see their kids swim. And that's at every pool. People want to see their kids when they get in the water, want to see them swim. So if you create better spectator, it was something versus one big wall, or if we can terrace that up where we actually can fit a bunch of people on that wall. I can tell you at Prairie Village, people generally love to be there because they have a nice berm on the pool that you actually have pretty good sight lines of what's going on in the pool. And so I've said all along that that's really, I've said that from the beginning, we need to find a way to incorporate that hill, preferably green space if possible, that people can lounge on during the day and during meets or events at the pool, you could watch that. So if we're moving that stuff over, we're building, if we have to build a retaining wall, I think the conversation was about, can we have different levels of it to fit more people on?
So we have stairs that let people go up to different levels?
Well, no, it would just be retaining walls. It would just, you'd have a retaining wall, you'd essentially walk up and walk on this level, or you walk up and walk on this level, or you walk up and walk on this level, and everybody looks down at the pool, and there's more people for visibility on the pool. But we'll get to that. Mission pool is $6.5 million.
What I'd like to do, if possible, I basically took your spreadsheet, so to speak, and I added some things that I think are also relevant
most in our pool?
I would say it's max 3.
3 swim, 2 dive.
Yeah,
3 swim and 2 dive.
And that,
And there's some cities I don't think that host them out, like Leewood. Does Leewood host competitive?
they host, we just don't know. We just haven't been doing, they're new to the league, but every city,
Everything in the city hosts pre-am, so all the ones that have just 25, they're all hosted too. Now, is it all city that doesn't go to every city?
all city is not, all city has been in Prairie Village now the last, or it's gonna flip between Prairie Village and Olathe is my understanding.
Because of the 50, then it's just.
Just because of the size of the,
Yeah. All cities are like, it's
lots of people.
So one of the other things that we were asked is we were asked to compare 25 to 50 meters. This was what we came up with. I'm sure if you ask somebody else could come up with a different list. But from our standpoint, 25 meter allowance for other amenities, whatever those amenities are, is debatable. There's more deck space, lower capital and operations costs. Those are the 3 things that I see on a 25 meter. 50 meter, you get larger cities have one, so there is a prestige factor. I think that, it says something about your community perhaps that you have a 50 meter pool. Once again, if you go back here, it puts you firmly in a different league of cities in terms of having, and we currently have one, which I think is another reason. Quicker swim meets and visibilities. I think that's an absolute, is that it's absolutely going to be quicker, and you have better visibility, and you have higher bed loads in the pool. If you have 50 meter, you can have more people in that pool. 6 lane versus 8 lane. 6 lane, you have more deck space, once again, lower capital and operations costs. Once again, more water you have to treat. 8 lane, quicker swim meets and higher bather loads. Perhaps there are other things you can fit, you can fit more people in the pool with an 8. I guess I could have had that on there also. But those are when we put our heads together, those were the things that kind of raised to the top of both of those lists. So since we were asked to compare those 2 things, that's what we came up with. And this ultimately is, once again, really what we need to establish. We really need to establish, are we going to go with a 50 meter pool? Are we going to go with 8 versus 6? Those are the 2 big things. We can decide that, hey, there's a feature we want to add. We can decide we might want to move something else. Once again, we've got constraints that we would need to raise those constraints, whether that's time or money. Because the other thing to keep in mind is that just the inevitability is we got to start building by winter. So we've got to work. Actually, what we want to do is we want to open for the 2020 pool season. So we work our way back on the time for construction. It gets us back to here, and there obviously are deadlines we have to hit for those things to happen. Now, if we miss some of those deadlines, we run the risk of we can't order our steel package, we won't start demo. There are things that we could run into. That's the time constraint. If that's not an issue, we can go back to the drawing board and change the whole design of the building.
Yeah. I want to kind of reiterate that for me, the issue isn't necessarily 50 meter, 25 meter, 6 lane, or 8 lane. What the issue that I'm seeing, I'm most concerned about, is a lack of pool space outdoors for recreational use. When you have that dive well taking up half of the 25 meter pool, you're literally have half of a 25 meter pool for recreational things that people do. And so to the extent that they're going to go inside, my understanding is that's a 4 foot 4 foot inside. You can't dive in 4 feet, can you? So, they're the things that are part of the summer pool experience are not, and I recognize that there are some things that it seems like financial considerations in terms of essentially earning a return on investment are.
Well, neither one of them are going to make money. You've made the statement before.
Right.
Neither one of them are going to make money.
Right. But what I'm saying is that indoor facilities and health club type of facilities you do see those in the private sector, so they can be profitable. You do not see community pools in the private sector hardly at all, because they are similar to the fire department and the police department and the streets. They are something that the community has decided it's important to have, and they invest money in. And So you want to maximize the recovery rate, but you know, you're going to lose some money. But my point here is that, you know, I just want to be clear, I'm not hung up on a 50 meter. I'm hung up on the fact that
We need more water.
we don't have enough water here that can be used for recreational activities in the summer.
You're clear.
And so,
Perfectly clear, yes, sir. Current MAC bather loads was another question we were asked. This was calculated by Larkin Aquatics in 1998. This is based on Johnson County, how they calculate bather loads, which is based on pretty much an industry standard. I've seen it be 24 per square foot for some areas versus, 20 versus 24. But these are the bather loads for each of those individual areas. These are the calcs that we've operated with for 20 years. We can discuss and debate, or we can, I see your
I'm going to
hand
ask some
up.
questions because I think it's important. We've got 42 people in the plunge pool. The plunge pool there is got 2 slides in it.
It's just based on the
Operationally-
water.
Yeah, right. It's based on water. It's not based on actual functionality of the facility. So it's kind of not a real number necessarily. So if you're using it to calculate compared to attendance, you know, that's not necessarily a valid number. 198 persons in our in the kiddie pool. I also don't see that as being realistic.
I don't think they're meant to be. I don't think we're going to have 700 people on the deck either. What's your point? These are just to show that they're the maximums.
Right. Well, again,
We've never had the maximums in our current pool. Nobody's pool runs at the maximum ever.
no.
These are just to show you that that is the maximum.
But what I'm saying is that the bather load is a kind of a phantom calculation, and if you're using it to try to compare to actual attendees, you need to be careful how you make that comparison. Is all I'm saying. They're not. Oh well, we're within the bather load, or we're half of the bather load, so we're necessarily safe. I think it's pretty important to understand that, and that's my point. We have on the building, we have 289 as an occupancy, and I believe that was probably figured, it's out there at the Marion Aquatic Center as beta load, and then you look at those other factors that.
Is it 289 or is it 252?
It's, well, if I put the computer up, I'd be able to tell you, I think it was 289 in the water, but I'm not sure. Something like that.
Well, these are the bather loads as calculated based off of Johnson County and Larkin Aquatics, who are professionals that do all of this. So that's what we've been running with for 20 years. So this is what they are.
That's a beta.
We were asked about attendance data at MAC. This is, on the left, is the weekend and holiday data. That was the initial information we were asked. So this is all the way up. It does not include this weekend because we put this together on Friday. But this is all of the weekend and holiday since we've been open this year. I think somebody said we should use this year versus last year since it rained last year. It was so hot this year. So that's why we pulled this information. It's weekends and holidays. Then what we have here is we've got average versus highest for the last 10 years. So the blue line represents our average, each one of those years for the last 10 years. The orange line is our peak. That is the day of the year. That's the most people that attended the pool over the course of a day. Doesn't necessarily mean that on this particular day we had 570, well, right here, we did 575 people, not necessarily all in the pool at the same time. That's how many people came to the pool that particular day. It's important to note that what you're seeing here is starts to change in 2014. And I think it's important that we talk about a couple things that occurred in 2014, because I'm going to talk about them again when I get to the slide on cost recovery. In 2014, well, in 2013, Anna showed up, or 2012, the end of 2012, Anna showed up. Beginning of 2013, she and I started to team up on Park and Rec because when I arrived here, I had a little bit of experience, and she had way more experience than I did, but we started to kind of look at how things had been run. We started to look at the facility that she inherited. We started to look at the swimming pool. We're in the process of this study occurring. One of the things that occurred on both of these sides is that in 2014, we changed the rules at the pool and said non-resident, we suggested that non-resident dailies should be allowed to come to the pool. So that's folks that are non-residents that don't have to get a pool pass. They can walk in the door. reason is that this is the information that we were looking at that point. That's not a good trend line. This says that basically the structure that we had at the pool, which was the pool pass system and primarily supported by Merriam residents, it was not necessarily heading in the right direction. And so when we changed that, how important is that? I'll show you in a minute. But of this 575, 311 of those people were walk-ups that don't live in Merriam. We want those people at our pool. We absolutely want those people at our pool. But that's just to tell you, when we start to look at some of these numbers, why is this swinging so wildly now? Well, because when it gets hot, people that live in some other community are allowed to come to our pool. I don't want to change that. I love the fact that that's the way that it is. But that's just so we understand the data. The trend up until that point, if you put a trend line on it, was not aimed in the right direction. It's the reason this has not moved that much. But these peak numbers have changed because we get a lot of folks from other communities that walk up to the door that we now allow that didn't. It's just a fact. It's not anything I'm sharing or anything more than that. I just want you to understand the data. Unless Anna has something.
Well, the only other thing I would add to that is prior to 2014, we did not accept credit cards at the pool. So there would be people that would walk up and would have to, if they didn't have the cash, they would either go to a different pool or they would go to an ATM. So that too has been a significant change in the model of how we operate at the pool as well. So it's a twofold thing that happened in 14, just so you have a full picture.
I'm sorry, I forgot some questions, but May 27th was opening day, right? Was that correct? We only had 146 people that day. Is that correct?
What the data says.
I think it was cool. There only half of the day was available. Was that the stormy day?
That was Saturday, or Sunday, excuse me, and then Monday was Memorial Day.
So we only had 120 here. I mean, it's,
No, I understand that. That just seems surprising.
the weather is a huge factor, and once again, I would tell you that, in my opinion, all of these numbers here, that's not a crowded pool. I mean, that's not a crowded pool.
Is it possible that there's something that's not correct about the numbers? I mean, there's more than one. I mean, are there categories of attendees?
There's many
Yeah.
categories of attendees. Yeah.
That would be.
But when they walk in the door, they're just a number.
Yeah, we don't know when they leave, and we don't know at any one point in time how many people in the pool. So our assumption is when we try to figure those out when we're asked, is people generally spend 3 hours at the pool, somewhere around there. So we can look at we can look and see between noon and 1, 200 people came into the pool, then we can figure, go 2 hours later, look at how many people we can go, well, we assume we know there's no more than a certain number of people, but we can't tell how many of the max are.
Correct. Sorry.
Another question that we have was the subsidy, which is how much between the revenue that's generated and the expenditure that it cost, what's the difference? That's the subsidy. Once again, here we see 2014. 60% is the goal. It's an industry standard. Some people call it 70. Some people look for 100% cost recovery. This used to be the worst graph that I used to show when I was in Prairie Village, because I don't think any of the council members in Prairie Village understood this until I showed them every year, because they just wanted to forget all about it. But the whole point of this is that in 14, two other things happened. In 14, we mentioned that we allowed non-residents, which ups some of our revenue, but in terms of expenditures, there were some internal personnel things that we made going forward to make things a little bit more efficient. There were some people that were inherited that didn't need to necessarily be there anymore, that had been there for long enough, they had moved on. But also, one of the other most important things is we had a study that said we need to sink a whole bunch of money into that pool. And so we started to make decisions. Until we know what we're going to do with this pool, we're going to go spend $200,000 on X, Y, Z. I mean, if it's critical to the pool, if we need to fix it and keep the pool open. So this doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a huge jump in revenue and all of a sudden we're meeting our goal at 60%. It means there's quite a few things that we're not paying for that we knew we needed to be. The capital outlay portion of these numbers isn't here. We should have been spending more money on that facility, but we knew we were having these conversations, so we were deferring maintenance on that.
You're still, it looks to me like
every 5 years, you should paint the basin. We haven't done anything with the basin except spot painted since I've been here. And actually, on the report this year from the health department, they said, if you operate next year, you have to paint the basin. So
What's that
that's a $50,000 price tag. We should,
Divided over 5 years, that is one, then the budget item that would be.
but it's a 1 year expense.
Yeah, it would hit
No, I
on this
understand.
chart in 1 year.
But it's a recurring capital expenditure.
Yes.
Right, but
yes.
that's not what's reflected in any of the other data. This is in each one of these years,
Well, that's what I'm
this
trying
is
to get at,
everything
though.
that we spent that was
That's
related
what
to
I'm
the
trying,
pool.
I'm trying to get at, what does it cost, what does the subsidy cost to operate the Miriam Aquatic Center, the outdoor pool that we have right now?
Any of these given years, it's this much.
Right, so.
That's the
Okay,
subsidy
so
any given year.
3 years ago, or the third year back, we're looking at about, what, 140,000 or so?
I'm sorry.
Okay, the last 2 years looked like about 100, a little over 100, barely over
Once again,
100,000.
because we didn't spend.
I understand that,
anything we
so a
needed to
year
spend.
before that's 104. When would be a time where, I mean, okay, you're looking at what, 200,000 or so?
So
Are you asking me like for an accurate read? Is that what you're trying to figure
No,
out?
I'm just
What-
trying to get a sense of how much we're spending on that. We're spending 100,000 plus a year on public art. I want to know how much we're spending on a community pool. That's what
Well,
I'm
in
trying
this
to-
year, we spent $250,000 and we brought in $140,000 in revenue.
But I'm trying to get at what is, you're telling me that's not
That's the
not a
subsidy.
good number.
So,
But what I'm telling you is that it's not a number, that does not take into account a report that says that we should have spent $250,000 in one of these 2 years to fix things that are falling apart.
Right.
So
When you're-
add $250,000 to that, and that's what that chart would look like.
When you're looking at recurring capital investments, they're called capital expenditures.
Understood.
You never, in order to do an analysis, an economic analysis of the project, you don't put them in, they occur in 1 year, but you look at them as a chunk that is spread out over the time between occurrences. And that's what I'm asking.
And
for
I
that.
understand your point, and we would if we could, but the whole thing has fallen apart. So it was always on a crisis response
So,
basis.
was there a study done?
Yes, there was a study done.
So is that data?
To tell us
That's
to
what I'm
minus
asking.
price the pool.
What I'm being told is $250,000 a year is what we should have been spending on the pool per the report to get it up to where it needed to be, which was fix the slides, fix the filter house.
And that's just to maintain the pool, which it needs to be replaced.
Which is what led us to this conversation in the first place.
So we can talk about this all night. This has nothing to do with what we're here to talk about.
That's
We're
what
not
led us
here
to
to
the
talk about what's going
conversation.
to cost us if we keep the pool, because we're not. That's not what we're going to do. So how much it costs us a year to keep going from the past is irrelevant to what's going to happen in the future. And we had an exhaustive study about this. In fact, in the material that is provided, if you have it or not, it's online. It'll show you that the new pool that we're going to is just a lot closer to breaking even than we would ever get with the pool that we have. Not that we have to just make money or even break even, but we certainly should not have a pool system that continues to lose money at the rate that the one that we have has.
So based on, well, these were answers to questions that we heard, but I think they're valid because they also played into conversations and decisions that have been made for the last 4 or 5 years. So I think it's worth, it was worth spending a little time talking about that. So at the conclusion of all of that, we went back to our design team and shared with them the feedback that we received at the last meeting, and that was, we talked about some deck space, we talked about some, if we could possibly put some clearer sight lines in there for moms with kids. We talked about the ability to move perhaps some of those amenities that are in there. We were told what's $1 million? So it sounded like perhaps money was something that was, well, not readily available. There was the consideration that if with the right proposal, we would have a conversation about perhaps finding some other funding and some other source. So we went back and we have 3 new proposals that we tried to take in what we heard from folks that were there on Monday evening, as well as some questions we heard from council. And I think that
Chris, are we saying in effect that our contingency of 1.2 million will be eaten up, we won't have that extra money?
We don't have that contingency to use towards additional features in aquatics. I mean, we're holding that contingency for like things as they design. Yeah, I mean, we can do some little things within that contingency, but that would, like, if anything else comes in over, we would have no money left over for this.
we're to where we either impact the inside that we showed, or we have to come up with time, or we have to not care about money.